your book begins with a moving story about Myrlie Evers. Could you share that with us?
This was one of those moments where, as a historian, you get to witness history. So this was back in 2017 at the grand opening of the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. And folks maybe forget, but this was shrouded in controversy, right? Because you're doing a museum about civil rights history in Mississippi. So was it going to give accurate history? There's a long history of people covering up the brutal realities of racism. And so there was a question about how accurate would this be? Turns out it was great. It's a very truthful, accurate history. And so I encourage people to go to the museum. But the other reason it was shrouded in controversy was the governor at the time, Phil Bryant, invited the president at the time, Donald Trump, to come to the grand opening. A lot of people weren't happy about that because of Trump's stances on race and racial policies. And so there were several dignitaries that pulled out of the ceremonies as a result of that, including the legendary civil rights activist and congressperson John Lewis refused to go. Benny Thompson, the local rep, refused to go. But Myrlie Evers did. And here's the thing. Myrlie Evers took a private tour of the museum before the ceremonies began. And in the museum, there's this tiny little theater. I'm talking maybe, fits 8 to 10 people. And it's darkened. And the only light in there is from the glow of the screen and also this small spotlight. The small spotlight is shining on a rifle, the same rifle that killed her husband, Medgar Evers, in 1963. And I recently went back to the museum, and the size of that theater struck me, because when you go in, you aren't more than an arm's length away from that rifle display. And so can you imagine what Myrlie Evers must have felt being in that room, steps away from the weapon that killed her husband and absolutely shattered her life? But after all that, she gives this nationally televised speech, has this beautiful message of hope and unity. Then she gives this smaller press conference, and that's where I was when I recorded her saying the words, "But there's something about the spirit of justice." A journalist had asked her, well, how does now in the 21st century, in terms of race relations, compare to the civil rights movement when you were active, when your husband was killed? And she said something very sobering. She says, "I'm seeing things now that I hoped I'd never see again." She's saying that after all these years, we haven't made as much progress as we would have hoped. And yet in the context of that, she says, but there's something about the spirit of justice. And she says it's like a war horse that's been put out to pasture, but then it hears the bell, and she calls it the bell of freedom, and it becomes straight and the back becomes stiff. And she ends with these words, "And you become determined all over again." And I sat back and said, whoa. Myrlie Evers in 2017 was in her 80s. By the way, she's still alive today. The past is not that long ago. And here she was, a woman who had dedicated her life to civil rights and human rights activism. And she should be relaxing by a pool, drinking a drink that has an umbrella in it and enjoying the fruits of her labor. And yet she says, "I'm ready to keep fighting." And that inspired me. And I said, we got to talk about that.
Yeah.